Well, hi there. This is Mark Harvey. I am the director of the MBA program at the University of St. Mary. And if you're watching this video, it's very likely that you have just been hired to become a new adjunct faculty member. So this is the first of two videos that I want to put together. The first one summarizes sort of policies and things that you just really need to know when interacting with students as a teacher here as an adjunct. And that's hopefully this will be very helpful to you. So that's this video. The next one will be a little more about what I expect in the classroom, like how should you interact with students as a teacher. And so we'll talk more about that in the next video. University of St. Mary is a great university with a great intellectual and academic tradition. We're really pleased to have you to be part of the team. So what I want to do in this video is talk a little bit about what some of those expectations are as far as teaching for us. And this is a video that I made when I sat down with a couple of adjuncts, sort of in person, so it's just basically filming me talking to them. And I thought you would benefit from this. Maybe we've already had an orientation like this in person, and that's the plan anyway. I like to talk to everybody personal and in person, but I also think it's worth having it here just in case you want to come back and revisit it and look at it again. So anyway, thanks very much for agreeing to teach for us. We're really excited to have you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. I want to tell you a little bit about the students also that we're going to be teaching. So first thing you should know is that it's sort of an odd population. Okay, so there are two primary groups of people that you'll probably find in the typical classroom. Most of them are probably the usual suspects that you would expect. That is probably, professionals who have been away from college for a while. They're coming back. They want an MBA because they want to make a lateral move, or they want to move up, or they want to improve their skills or whatever. So, professionals of age anywhere from 20-something on up with varying levels of experience and quite a bit of business experience to bring to the table to really enliven the classroom. And it's people like that who, we lean pretty hard on because we want a sort of an interactive experience. And a lot of these people know a lot of stuff. I mean, every time I come into a classroom, I learn new things from the students. It's like, I'm not an accountant. I've got an accountant in one of my classrooms. If I want to talk about ethics and accounting, I mean, she's dealing with it every day. I don't know that much about that stuff. So she brings this richness and depth to the classroom, and I want to hear from these people. They can learn from each other quite a bit, and so trying to unleash that a little bit is a really good thing. The other group of students are traditional aged college students, that is people who have just finished their undergrad, and they're looking to get an MBA so that they can get a better job at an entry level. So we don't, some MBA programs traditionally have sort of said, well, we're not going to take you until you've been out for a couple of years. We don't do that. And one of the reasons why is because we have a vibrant graduate assistant program at the main campus. So there's a lot of students who may have been, good undergrads, right? And then they can basically get their education paid for by being a graduate assistant at the main campus, and then they'll funnel into one of our graduate programs. And so it's a great professional development opportunity for them. It's a way for them to get their education paid for. They worked at Lowe's or McDonald's or something like that. And there's a very, very diverse group of people that not only graduate from St. Mary, but also sort of come into the classroom. So it's a really rich sort of environment for that. But you just have to understand that, these people don't have a lot of experience. So you have half the class that's going to be like, we know quite a lot already, please enlighten us. And the other half that really just were undergrads and they don't quite get the professional aspect of it yet. They don't quite get that a master's program is significantly different. It's not just an extension of like, hey, I just took these classes and now it's more of the same, right? I try to establish a strong culture here where when they go through the initial advising process, I basically tell them, this is what this is like. This is what you can expect. This is how many hours per week really you should be spending in order to try to be successful at this program. Two very different kinds of groups that you get in the classroom. And so sometimes the challenge is trying to meet the needs of both of those groups. And it usually works pretty well because the olders kind of coach the youngers a little bit. And the youngers have a little bit more confidence usually about coming back into the classroom because they've just been in the classroom. And some of the olders are like, well, maybe this is a new experience for me. Now, class size, I'll also mention too. We're not a huge program. We don't run really huge classes. I would say our average class runs somewhere, 8 or 9 students probably. Some of the bigger classes, there may be 15. You're probably not going to get a class that's more than 20 students most of the time. Right now, my leadership class has got 10 people in it. That's probably about, down the middle as far as what we would expect. When you have students in class, they are all going to be in class. They're going to be here, right? Okay. If you were teaching an online class, it would all be asynchronous online.
Okay.
Now, I will say that if you have a student who, they've got to go out of town or something like that, I wouldn't just go rogue and do this on your own, but talk to me. Like, I'll work it out with them. We can set up a Zoom session. All of our rooms are sort of Zoom enabled and stuff. So, I usually just let the students Zoom in if they absolutely have to. But really, with the in-person courses, people want to be here. Like, this is the attraction, and one of the reasons why I think our program has stayed afloat in the face of loads and loads of MBA competition is because we have real-life in-person classes, and most of our students want that. We have a great online program too, but our students also want that online experience, and they don't really want to show up. They don't want it to be synchronous. They want to do their homework in their pajamas, and that's the way it is. So they do have the option to flip back and forth, though. So they can go not week to week, but course to course. Mm-hmm. So it may be that maybe they're taking some concentration courses online, but the rest of their courses may be here live in the classroom. Some of it also depends on enrollment. So if there's a class that just isn't going to make, for whatever reason, in person, then we may flip it online if we have to. It's not my favorite thing because, for the most part, like I said, students that come in here, they're like, no, I don't want to do online. This is what I want to do. I want to be here. And so I want to provide that experience for them. And that's, again, like I said, one of the attractions of this program is they can do so much of this stuff and not have to do it online. There are some hybrid aspects to our in-person program, though. So, and I was going to talk about this in a few minutes, but I might as well go ahead and mention it now, right? So, we have 45 hours of seat time that we have to account for, essentially, for accreditation and for state standards and all that sort of thing. You'll notice we have 8-week courses, and each one is 4 hours, which doesn't somehow end up being 45 hours, right? And math, last time I checked, it's up to 32. So what we have had to do is hybridize our in-person programs to have some online elements to it. So you'll see that in the syllabi there are some, like, here's a discussion forum, and you're going to do this on your own time, sort of whatever, outside of class. We have determined X amount of outside course time satisfies our accreditors to make up for that extra 13 hours that gets us from 32 to 45. Before the start of the term, right, write the syllabus, and by write the syllabus, I basically mean fill in the name and dates, right? Syllabi are sort of preset. Your curriculum is preset, so all of the assignments are set from one week to another. You don't have to. In fact, I don't want you to change any of the assignments. Part of the reason why we do things this way is that for our accreditation, we want to be able to tell our accreditors that students are getting more or less the same experience from one course to the next. And so what I expect you guys to bring in is your expertise. You can teach it pretty much any way you want to, as long as we're teaching the core objectives, and as long as students are capable of completing those assignments that are lined up along the line. Otherwise, go be creative, right? Do your thing. Your course doesn't have a textbook. It just has the simulation. Yours does have a textbook, and we can get you PowerPoints and stuff like that if it's helpful for you as far as preparation. Right, so when you log into the LMS, I want you to complete the instructor profile, include a photo of yourself. I think that's important. Just, kind of personalizes the whole thing. I would put up an announcement summarizing your expectation for the course. And post a substantive instructor introduction in there so they know a little bit about you. They may not look at it. At least in an online class they might, right? And you guys may end up teaching online at some point too, like I'm kind of talking both sides of this. But for an in-person class, they may not look at that. I would encourage both of you just to, tell them what you told each other, what you told me about your background. I think they really, they want to know that we've got people with substantial expertise teaching these classes. They're just not some random person I pulled off the street, right? It's like, I want them to be impressed, and you guys are impressive people. So, play it up, man. Make it work. When it comes to communication with students, I want you to answer direct student inquiries generally within a day of receipt. I do think that the faster we respond to students, the better they're going to feel. A lot of people work on assignments over the weekends, and sort of if they're in the middle of it and you're checking in, it's kind of a cool thing to do. It's a nice thing to do to sort of be in contact with them and offer them that support as much as you can. You should be using St. Mary email for all correspondence with students and administration. Again, this is sort of a FERPA consideration that we need to make sure that is all internal and we don't know who's using personal email, so that's how we guarantee that. If you're teaching online, and as well, even if you're teaching in person, you can message with students through the LMS. There's a messaging system inside there, and students will generally respond to that just as easily as they would to emails. That's acceptable as well. And then in online classes, respond to every student introduction individually in the student lounge. So you're going to have that chance to build that rapport in an in-person class pretty easily, but in those online classes, you want to look for those opportunities to interact with students in a more personal way, and that's one way to do it if you're doing it online. If it's a student issue, just generally probably I'm the first person to go to. Technical issues, okay? If there's problems, just let me know as fast as possible. There is a tech support link. Our tech people are usually pretty fast about that. It's pretty good about helping with any engage issues and so on. But I will say that nobody's perfect. So let me know also if there's a tech thing. Don't just go through the tech people. The more you keep me in the loop, the more likely it is. I should say the less likely it is we're going to have problems. Generally, they're very good about that, but I don't mind jumping in there. Attendance and withdrawal. Again, these are policies, some of which I mentioned before, but some of it I think you need to just keep in mind for advising students. Like if they ask you questions, this is also I think helpful just in terms of just getting a scope of the class and being aware of your grading. So if you have me teaching an online class, we do have to record attendance for at least the first couple of weeks. And really it's sort of an enforcement method we use in order to ensure that students are sort of not cheating on financial aid. If they're collecting financial aid, not showing up to class, they shouldn't be doing that. So it's one way to sort of track that. Generally speaking, if students do not engage in that first week, like if you're online or something and they don't show up, they don't email you, they don't even check into the online thing, we'll try to reach out to them, but we'll just automatically drop them from the class at that point. Our assumption at that point is that if they are not engaging actively in the class, maybe it was an accident, maybe they changed their mind, we do not want to charge them for a class that they're not going to take. And that similarly, we'll get to this in a little bit, is that the refund policies are that in an 8-week class, if they withdraw in the first week, they get all their money back. So as long as we get students out by that first week, then there's no issues there. For the on-campus stuff that you guys are doing, on-campus courses are one night a week, 6 to 9:50 in the evening. I've already told you about the seat time thing. And also, you can't dismiss early. I'd like to say that's obvious, I hope, right? But I have sometimes had instructors who just for whatever reason, maybe the students pressure them, maybe they don't feel like doing it, whatever. We can't do that. For the purposes of our accreditation and for us to run a program that's already pretty tight, I said we're doing 32 hours over 8 weeks, and that seat time is precious. It's important. And these students are either paying their money or an employee's money or employer's money or, the Fed's money or something, some kind of financial aid. They're supposed to get a quality experience. And if we're cutting corners on that, we are doing them a disservice. Now, sometimes there's a disconnect between what students want and what is best for them, right? So it's like, hey, I've been working all day. I really just want to go home, see my wife, watch TV. Totally get it. totally understand that, right? But that's not why they're here. And they're giving up a certain period of their time and a certain amount of their money in order to accomplish something significant. And if we can't deliver that to them, then we aren't doing our jobs. So, either one of you, if for some reason you feel like, wow, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to fill these 4 hours, right? Come talk to me. Like, I've been doing this since 1996, and I have had a lot of experience keeping students awake close to 10 o'clock at night. And so, there are things you can do. And really, that's the biggest challenge, I think, is it is a tough gig to teach between 6 and 10 in the evening, right? How do you keep things going? How do you keep things rolling? We'll talk about that in a little bit in terms of methods, ideas, ways to approach that. But, like I said, you really do have to keep them here. And, at least with me, they don't complain. But then again, I'm the director of the program. They don't try to, So every now and then you'll get can we get out early? And I'm like, but there's so much to do. And there always is. For me, this is almost not enough time. I mean, I not only fill up the time, I'm like, oh, geez, I hope I get it all in, right? And that's these subjects. I mean, there's more to talk about than there are hours to talk about them. And so I think, like I said, I'll help you if you have trouble, but it shouldn't be an issue. Students cannot miss more than 2 classes cumulatively. If you're looking at an 8-week course and students are missing more than 2 classes, that's more than 25% of the course, and that's pretty detrimental. That could really set them behind. And so if it gets to that point, keep me posted. Let me know. I mean, I really need to intervene and talk to this student, tell them, you need to get into class and make this happen, or else you're really going to fail. You're not going to make this work, and you need to be committed. So I need to kind of have that talk with them if that starts happening. So record attendance in LMS. I would say do it every week. First 2 weeks for online, but it's those first 2 weeks that are sort of the critical things that the registrar is keeping an eye on. If the student initiates a course withdrawal, the date is determined by the student's notice. So we're not going to be super hardcore about the paper processing point. Like if a student emails me and says, I want to drop this course, the date that they email me is going to be the date that I am treating as the official statement of withdrawal. I'm not playing tricks with anybody or whatever. It's like, they have expressed an intent, and I'm going to respect that intent. When they withdraw, then something happens on their transcript, right? They either get a W, a WP, or a WF, and that depends on when they withdraw and how they are doing in the course. So if it's in the first 4 weeks that they withdraw, there's no penalty, just shows a W on the transcript, and that means nothing. It just means that, hey, I took this course and I decided that I didn't have time, so I'm going to do it again later, kind of thing, right? If it's after the 4th week, then you have to report a WP or WF, right? They're withdraw passing or they're withdraw failing, right? If they withdraw passing, then it's the same as the first scenario. It just means, hey, I was doing okay, had to leave the class, right? WF, though, literally is the same thing as an F. So if they are failing and they withdraw from that class, again, this makes no sense to me. They might as well just give it a shot and try to finish the thing at this point, right? But, then they fail the class. And in this MBA program, 1F means you're kicked out of the program. So it's pretty significant if they fail one. That WF does have consequences, and that's the reason why I'm telling you about this, is that, if you see a student really struggling in those first 4 weeks, have them talk to me as soon as possible, because I'd much rather have them do an initiated withdrawal in those first 4 weeks. Just take the W, come back and try again later when they actually have time, and then they can be successful, as opposed to getting themselves stuck in a situation where it's like, I'm 2 weeks behind, I can't get caught up, I'm failing the course, now I have to withdraw, there's some death in the family, something that they can't control suddenly happens, right? I don't want them to be in that situation, that circumstance. And so, again, keeping me informed if you think there's any potential problems, and then I can kind of intervene, help them out, try to figure out a plan, whatever. And I would work out with you guys too about whether or not there is a plan to be had. Generally speaking, if students get a couple of weeks behind, they're probably not going to get caught up. it's just not realistic for it to happen. And if that happens, I usually just recommend that's like you really probably just need to withdraw and come back and try this course again, because you're not going to have a good educational experience while you're trying to get caught up on 2 weeks of work and doing this week, and it just like the whole thing snowballs. It's an accelerated class, 8 weeks. There's stuff due every week. It's just really hard for most students to do that. There's just too much of a load.
You typically see WS on like week 7.
I don't see too many WFs, but you're right. They usually happen toward the end of the course. It's usually somebody where it's like they've just disengaged, and for everything we possibly can do, they're not returning emails. They just have kind of fallen off the face of the earth. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Can I do this? Can I pull it together? And the answer is usually no at this point, because like if they've been out for 2-3 weeks and not been doing anything, then that's the case. Because the student's on the path to failure, we got to deal with it before weeks 1, 2, or 4, right? Week 1, basically, 100% refund if they let us know, 50% in the second week. So again, like I said, if we think we see trouble, even early on, especially if there's like some life crisis and you're getting noise from the students like, I don't know if I can handle this right now because all this stuff's going on, right? Like have them talk to me. It may be an opportunity for them to get some of their money back. But after that second week, there's no refund. And so that's money-wise, it's important to keep that in mind. And then, of course, the 4th week is the key point as far as that WPWF, making sure that if they're not passing that class at that point, then I need to have a talk with them and see, like, are they going to get their act together, or do they need to withdraw from that class and do it later? So there's that. There's a standardized late policy in the program. It's 10% per day for every assignment that is late. When you return graded work, we want you to enter zeros in the grade book too. That's the wake-up call for students so that they know that this thing that they have not turned in is actually affecting their grade. I know you would expect students to probably already know that or think that, but when you do not enter a grade, then it doesn't register as a 0, which means that students will glance at it and say, oh, I'm doing okay, even though they're not. So there is that. But yeah, we have that late policy in place to keep students on track, really more than anything. And most students are going to get stuff in most of the time, not a huge problem. But there are some who are procrastinators, and I don't want a situation where they're piled up for 2 weeks and they can't get caught up again. And so it's an incentive. It's an excuse also for you to reach out to them. Like if somebody's turning in something late, like, hey, what's going on? Everything okay? A little reminder, you got to get the stuff in on time. Now, this is not, it's in the syllabus, it's a policy, but it's also not, but it's also something you can flex on a little bit if you need to, right? So, your student is like, yeah, I'm going to have a baby. Right? Like, okay, when can you have it into me? Right? When I have students, and it doesn't have to be that extreme, right? But like, hey, I got this business thing, I got to be out of town, I'm not going to make this deadline, I'm going to have a hard time with this, can I have an extension, right? Fine with me, right? What I usually do is I'll negotiate with students to say, what date can you get that to me? And if as long as it's like, within the next week or something, I'm like, okay, that's cool. We'll do that. That's your new deadline, right? If they don't get it on that deadline, then we start kicking in that 10%, right? But if they're communicating, if they're being responsible, and if they're not being abusive particularly, because there's some people who'd be like, yeah, I can't do this. And then the next week it's like, oh, I still can't do this. And then it all gets pushed off. There has to be sort of a limit to what all this is, because the worst thing is somebody like doing all the work in the last 2 weeks, and then you got all this stuff to grade, and they're not getting anything out of the experience. Now you can define that for your students, and then like maybe put it as an announcement in your LMS that this is how I'm interpreting this, and say it to the students on the first night of class. This is the way I am interpreting this policy. So that way it's in print in their LMS, and you have said it to them, and then there is no miscommunication. Exactly. You can tell them that, like, this is what I expect. Like, 11:59, midnight is late, okay? If that's what you want to do. I don't do that, actually. I mean, most everybody gets their stuff in on time. But every now and then I'll have a student who's like, well, I might be late, I got to work in, and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to be grading it at 11:59. As long as it's ready, like, when I wake up in the morning, that's fine. I don't care, either way. just get it in before I start grading it, and that's going to be tomorrow at 8 a.m.
Well,
Really, the troubled graduate students are generally not going to be people who are like looking for loopholes. It's usually going to be people where, either through being overwhelmed through personal circumstances or your responsibility, they just stop engaging. So anyway, but that's, like I said, you have some flexibility. I have had instructors ignore the policy before, which I don't like, but it usually leads to trouble for them when they do, because usually when they ignore that policy, then it's going to be somebody week 7 saying, I don't understand why I've got so much trouble here, and I got all these assignments to do, and nobody told me about a late policy. Well, it's there in the syllabus, right? So, I do want you to enforce that policy. All right. So grading policy for the MBA. So students have to maintain a 3.0 GPA in the program. If it falls below that, they're on academic probation, and then they've got 6 credit hours to get back on track, or they're dismissed from the program. Graduate degree seeking students will be automatically dismissed with a grade of 1 F or more than 2 Cs. So 3 Cs, and they're out as well. And I told you about the appeal process a little bit already. If they want to get back in the program, they have to reapply. Anybody can reapply. If they're let back in, then they're given 2 terms basically to get an A or a B in that class. And if they don't, then they're permanently dismissed. So, and that's another thing that I have to do also. Sometimes they're like, get me in, I want to get back in as fast as I can. I'm like, okay, you check your life first, man, because you might need some time to, really, I want you to come back when you are ready, right? And because if you fail again, you're done. So let's make sure that you're set up for success. As far as grading expectations, I want you to provide substantial specific comments on all the graded assignments, including the weekly discussions. There are standardized rubrics in the program, so it's pretty easy. You just sort of click the button and it automatically tabulates the numbers for you. If for some reason you think that it's not tabulating in a way that reflects what you think they actually deserve, then you can sort of edit the final number and explain what your thought process is there. There's obviously a place to leave comments, but yeah, we use basically the same rubrics across the program so that students get used to that level of it's not sort of arbitrary, and it's not they come to expect it. It's very predictable. Work should be graded and returned at least 24 hours prior to the due date. I think we can do better than that usually, but it's like with this accelerated program, students need to have feedback from the previous week, or else they're already working on their stuff, and they're sort of like, they have no idea what your expectations are. I mean, you told them your expectations, but they don't know how it actually grades. They don't know how it actually works. And so, and one assignment often builds upon the other. And so building that pattern, that predictable pattern of this is how this teacher is going to grade, this is how I can adjust, this is how I can improve. Most of the time with our graduate students, they will adjust to whatever your expectations are. I tend to be a little bit on the hard grading side, I think, or at least based on my experience. Students will come in and they'll do their first week work and it isn't up to my expectations or standards, right? I tell them specifically what it is that I do expect, and most of those students then will kick it up a level and they'll rise to that occasion, and that's great. The ones who don't, I have to keep kind of poking them. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Come over here, I'm trying to talk to you. But most of them are very conscientious and willing to sort of do what it takes in order to meet whatever your expectations are. This is our grading scale. So we have A, B, C, and F. There's no D's in the graduate program. So basically they got to get a 70 or better, or they fail. And like I said, that F means they're kicked out of the program. We tend to be pretty traditional in the way that we look at grading. So, not a big fan of the whole grade inflation thing, right? I mean, when we're looking at an A, it really should be excellent. Students may not be getting 100% on everything all the time. There are some 4-credit assignments, obviously, out there, but we are assessing them and their abilities. And so, A to me is you're doing a great job. You are a star graduate student, right? It's like you're awesome, right? B is you're getting it right. You're doing very, very good work. That's awesome. That's great. C, it's satisfactory, average work, maybe a little on the weak side, right? Not failing, right? The C is you are not failing, right? And then your F, students failing, right? So, like I said, usually it's that they don't turn stuff in. That's the most likely scenario when they fail. There are some who still have comprehension and even writing challenges from time to time. And so it happens. You know, sometimes people manage to slip through and, you know, maybe they're good at some things and not some others. Anyway. But if they do have trouble with certain things, you definitely want to direct them to me. You know, if you like, hey, why is this student doing so badly? They're a graduate student. This is weird, right? Send them off to me. As I was saying before, we also have opportunities for students to get support. So we have tutor.com, which is 24/7 live online tutoring. Students can get online and ask somebody about anything, really. I mean, they could get tutoring on finance if they want to, or accounting, or whatever. They can submit papers and get some feedback on that stuff. And it's been a really good support tool, particularly for our graduate students, where, you know, most of them do pretty well anyway. You know, they're not getting into the program to start off with usually, unless they've got a strong background. But you know, it's a really good thing. Our standardized style we use is APA. So obviously you're familiar with Purdue OWL, I'm sure. I encourage students to use web-based citation systems. Like I use Zotero in my own publication stuff, because it's like, why manually type out bibliographies when you can push a button and generate it for you, right? And they're super easy to use. You know, I don't think you're not cheating if you do that. Now, you do have to know your APA well enough to know, like, that sometimes these systems don't work quite like they're supposed to, and if it's not entered in correctly in the database, then it will not generate correctly in your paper, so you gotta, like, eliminate those errors. But, you know, I'm all in favor of things that are gonna save them some time. So we also have some primers. So there are some students that come into the program where maybe they didn't have a business background. Maybe they had a degree in something different. And so writing, stats, economics, those are usually the problem areas for them. So we may offer those to them. They're self-paced primers. They're like $35 or $40, and, you know, kind of get them up to speed. There are some primers that we've built into our master's courses for this reason as well. So like accounting and finance, for example, like every student is going to get one of those primers at the beginning of one of those courses, irrespective of their prior background, because they're not going to get to a master's level with nothing. And so we build some of that stuff in there as support for them, so they can really hit the ground running when it comes to entering some of those more advanced courses, particularly the quantitative ones. I don't have this listed here, but I was just thinking about this as well. I mentioned the Keller Learning Commons. That is our learning center, library, you name it. All of our library stuff is accessible online, and so students don't have to obviously show up physically in order to get all the resources they normally would get. There are great databases in there. You know, they have access to Business Source Premier and a whole load of other databases. And, you know, at the master's level, we do expect them to engage with some peer-reviewed literature as well. Like, they should be reading some advanced stuff when they are doing their writing. They should be incorporating some academic literature, not just Googling random stuff that some blogger says. So we really do expect a higher level of performance when it comes to some of that stuff. Reporting academic dishonesty. So we do have Turnitin that's built into the thing, so you can use that to determine level of similarity on this stuff. So if you run into that situation, please get me involved. Let me know, okay? I'm not trying to step on your toes or whatever, but like, I know these students, and if there is a recurring problem over the program, then I need to know about it so that I can take the proper administrative action to deal with that student. There's no way you as an individual instructor could know whether or not they did something in a previous course and they're a repeat offender. So I need to get involved in that. So that for that reason, every time you have an issue, even a suspicion, talk to me about it. Just because somebody has engaged in what you think is an act of plagiarism doesn't necessarily mean that it's egregious enough to rise to the level of failing a course or maybe even failing an assignment, right? But we want to talk about that. Is this a learning opportunity for a student that really doesn't get it? Or is this an opportunity, or is this a situation where they've been really egregious and it's really time to freaking deal with it? And so that's a kind of conversation that we can have, but we take it really seriously either way. And so I think us having a talk about how to deal with that student and to understand the larger context of whether or not there's been any previous problems before is really important. Some of the consequences, right? I mean, it could be, if it's a minor thing, it could be an APA violation, like on a rubric where you give them a 0 on that, they didn't cite correctly aspect of the rubric, right? And then you use it as an opportunity to say, all right, well, you didn't quote X, Y, and Z properly, so this is the right way to do it. Don't do it again, and now right? It could be receiving a 0 for an assignment. Academic dishonesty report filed with the university. We will do this like every time there's a significant one. We'll put a report there at the university level too. I don't get those reports, so you have to tell me manually, but I could help out with that. Could mean failing the course, could mean dismissal from the program, so there's a range of different possibilities, and it is, like I said, something we take really seriously. To keep things in perspective, if you guys have worked with Turnitin before, you may be familiar with the way the report works. I will say that, I think Turnitin is an excellent tool, but it is not determinative of an outcome, okay? If I'm looking at a report, and let's say there's a 25% or 30% on it or something, you can bet I'm going to go in and look at it and see what's going on. Maybe it's a one-page paper and the turn-off bibliography wasn't clicked and the bibliography is creating a false positive, right? Or maybe it's picking up the student's personal information, or I don't know. There's all sorts of reasons why there may be a high percentage, and you look inside it and you're like, all right, it's not that bad. Right? It's not really a problem. Some instructors have asked me before, so what's the magic percentage? And I'm like, there's not a magic percentage. It's you have to look at the paper and you have to figure out, is this student doing something egregious? Is this student doing something that needs to be corrected, right? This is not something where it's like, X percentage and that means they get whatever grade. It's a tool for figuring out what they're doing, and then we can determine the consequences. All right, now we get the AI talk. Okay, so this is what the policy says in the syllabus. Use of AI software, ChatGPT or other similar programs, strictly prohibited for the purpose of substituting student writing, computations, or other assignments, is considered plagiarism and a violation of the academic honesty policy. Violators will be contacted and expected to meet with the instructor. Now notice it does not say you will automatically get an F for doing any of this stuff, okay? And the reason why is because we are in a really gray area when it comes to this. This sounds pretty absolute, but it's much less absolute than you might think. This is the way it plays out in practice, okay? So, and I've had a whole bunch of students. I've dealt with this here. It usually is that I somehow notice that the student's style is significantly changed, and wow, what's going on there, right? Turnitin actually has an AI detection option now, where it's like, I know, I was going to say something about that, but it will say like whatever percentage it thinks it is might be derived from another source. So that's a red flag. However, there's problems with that, right? So first of all, it doesn't tell you what parts necessarily are AI generated. It just kind of gives you a percentage. For another thing, it's not perfect. Like sometimes there are false positives that might happen. Like I have seen situations where students maybe are using something like Grammarly, which is a perfectly ordinary, nice, I encourage you to use it to improve your writing sort of tool. And if they get a false positive off of Grammarly, there's no way I want to penalize them for that necessarily. And so the long and the short of it is there's lots of not plagiarism, there's lots of AI detection software out there, but almost none of it is completely reliable. And that means that if you go too hardcore in this direction, then you're going to end up with punishing students for stuff they may or may not have done. So that means that we have to engage the students in order to try to figure out what's really going on here. So every time I've had this situation, this is the way I have approached it, and this is the way I would recommend that you approach it too, is that, I will say, hey, Turnitin has got a high percentage on that AI, or, these are the reasons why I suspect maybe you're using AI or whatever, right? Can you tell me what you did? Just tell me what's going on, right? Talk to me. And every time I've done that, the student has said, yes, I have used AI. This is how I've used AI. They've been completely honest. Nobody's denied it whatsoever. And this is what I did. And then I'll usually say, okay, here's the reasons ethically why we might not want to do this and so on. So we're having a conversation. This is a new thing. So understanding the ethics, having that conversation is important. And then I'll just basically tell them that, like, okay, well, let's set a new deadline. Okay, what's the new deadline for the assignment? Let's rewrite it. Give you a chance to do this again. They send it back to me, and that's what I do. If it happens again, then we can have another conversation. If it's a situation where it's like, okay, I'm having issues with Grammarly or whatever, you just kind of got to give them the flexibility. Because the fact is that, based on everything I've read from different professors and so on, and different ways people are dealing with this, is that there's a schism really in terms of the way people are responding to all this. Some people are like hardcore, like, must punish them. They are cheating and, go get them, right? And there's others who are like, it's their education, right? It's like, I can't do anything about it and I can't prove it, so I'm not going to do anything. And so what I'm proposing is sort of like a maybe down the middle sort of approach, where we actively engage the students. We teach them about how to do this properly, how they're cheating themselves really of the experience. Another thing that I talk to students a lot about too is about how unreliable AI is, right? Like, you can ask it to do something for you, but it may not be super great. And it's a great tool. Like, I want to encourage them to use it in certain ways, right? I think it's acceptable for students to use AI for idea generation. Like, I don't know what to write my paper about. Give me some ideas on what to write a paper about. Give me a list of some stuff to read that I can go and check out to try to figure stuff out. It's like, it's an amazing search engine if that's what you're using it for, right? And they're going to be using it in business. And so they gotta reckon with it. And we have to reckon with it. Bottom line is, I do not want them to use these tools to do their work for them. And I tell students this in the first day of class too. It's like, if what you're doing is copying and pasting the prompt into ChatGPT and taking that thing and pasting it into a paper and calling it your own,
that's plagiarism.
Yeah, you are not, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? You need to get to the point. This is a master's program. You're supposed to master things, right? It's like you have to get to the point where you can look at this stuff and determine, be your own expert and determine what is good, what is valid, what is not valid, right? And I guarantee you're going to be sending this paper off now to somebody who is an expert at this stuff, and they're going to look at this and they're going to say, this is a bunch of crap. So you better make sure that whatever just came out of that, got vomited out of that machine, is okay, or else you really are going to get in some trouble.